Hello everyone, today I'm going to show you how to make these rose wirework earrings, and this is what they look like. So these are the ones I'm going to show you how to make here. So these are a little bit bigger in it. I've also made a pair where I've used finer wire and then also made them smaller. So you can really customize it to whatever you want to. How large you prefer your earrings to be is completely personal preference. So if you want to learn how to make these, pretty simple and easy to do. Just get the technique right, then keep watching. So these are then the wires that we'll need. Now both of these are regular round copper coated wire that I'm working with here. So the first one is a 0.8mm and this is going to be the structure, so the base wire. And then here I have a 0.4mm and this is going to be the weaving wire. Now all you'll need apart from this is some earring finding, so whatever kind that you prefer to use. So let's get it all together and let's get started. So then we'll need some lengths of wire to begin with here. Now what I have here is a 0.8mm and this is about 60 centimeters long. So it also depends what earrings you want to make. So this is to make the large ones. That's what I'm going to show you how to make. Now obviously if you want to make them even larger than what I'm going to do, because obviously people have different taste, then you might want to use an even longer length. But if you want to make them smaller but you prefer the look of the 0.8mm as the base wire, you can also get away with using a shorter length for this. Whereas for the earrings with the 0.6mm as the base wire, I used about 40 centimeters of that length there. And then as for the weaving wire, in this case for the large earring I'm using 0.4mm, and what I prefer to try and do with most of what I'd make with wire is for the weaving wire to try and use one length for the whole piece if possible. So if you want to do that, for the 0.8mm base wire and the 0.4mm weaving wire, so the large ones, I used 3 meters of this 0.4mm, so that's quite a very long length to work with. But obviously you can do it just taking your time, working slowly, or you can also work with shorter lengths and just keep adding in more wire, because you could also risk, they say, your wire might snap while you're making it and you might have to add a new wire anyway. So that is completely up to you what you prefer to do, but you can always add in new wire and work with shorter lengths if you prefer that. And then as for the small earring where I'm using the 0.6 as a base wire, for that weaving wire I'm using a 0.25mm wire, and for that I'm using about 2 meters. Again, same principle, you can use that full length or you can just use shorter length and add in more wire as you go. So then to start off with here, what we need is, I'm going to start out just using a pair of round nose pliers, and then obviously we want the length, the base wire length, so in this case it's the 0.8mm. And I want to start out from the very center of the rose and then we're working outward from there. So in the very center I kind of just want to get a little loop here at the end of the wire, so very end of it. I'm going to just turn to make a loop, and I like it to not be too big but also not too small, because obviously you want to be able to get your weaving wire in there as well. Just turn it round, and I then also leave a little space between the very end of the wire and then where it meets up with itself. I'm not making it completely tight because we need to make sure that the space for the 0.4mm wire to coil around continuously around the base wire here. So now I'm in this position. What I want to then start doing now is actually attaching the weaving wire as well. So I get the length that I'm working with, and then I'm going to attach this weaving wire, so the very end of it here, to this little loop that I've made. So what I'm going to do is work around this loop, and I'm just starting towards one end here of the weaving wire and leaving a bit of a tail, because just to begin with it's a bit easier working with the short tail rather than the full length, because obviously we're just working in a very small area right now. So the beginning part here can be the most fiddly because there isn't that much to work with, but once we start building a little bit it does get much easier because you have more to hold on to. So what I'm going to do is attach it, and you can kind of actually attach it around here instead of right in that little circle. Makes it a little bit easier. So I'm going to place the wire here, leaving just a bit of a tail, and then I actually want to coil this around the base wire. So it just means wrapping it around here just a few times to start off with to get this attached first of all. And I also don't want to do too much because then we might have to just undo it anyway, because then I want to get it into position. So I'm just going to push my wraps close together, and then I'm going to start guiding this inwards towards the loop that I made all the way towards, you could say, basically the end of the wire, and push it all the way in. And I'm just leaving this little tail just to have something to hold on to, just for now, and then we can go in and cut that off in a bit. So there we go. Now I'm in position here. I have my long tail now that I want to be working with, coming out kind of technically down through the center, and then out below, and then out around the side to come back over the top and go down through the middle again. So this is now the position where we're at. So we now need to start also thinking about the next steps as we keep coiling, instead of just continue to coil, because we need to start shaping the rows, so basically the petals in place as well. So to do that, like I said, before I go any further with the coiling of the weaving wire, I want to bring the long tail of my base wire further around, but start creating the shape that I want to achieve. So that means you can easily just use your hands and fingers for now. So just start bringing it around to the other side here. So it's almost like, if you can imagine, a spiral, making sure there's going to be a bit of an open gap, because that's how we achieve the petals. Bringing it around, and I'm actually bringing it around towards the end of where I have the first section of coils that I've already done. It fits pretty perfectly. And then once I'm there, so this tail is basically meeting up with the circle itself, I'm then going to grab some chain nose pliers here. And for the rest of the rows, this is what I'm going to be working with. It's actually chain nose pliers to help shape the rest of it. So what I'm going to do is, we need obviously the long end to come back out again. So I'm going to grab right in there where I want the connection point to be, and then bend it back outwards just a little bit. So something like that you can see here, and you get that little hint of the very first petal on the very inside the middle of the flower. So now that we're at this point, again I have my little tail to hold on to that helps just hold, first of all, the piece, but also the weaving wire, because otherwise the weaving wire can just kind of keep rolling around. So now we need to check for the coils. So what I'm going to do, so we're just going to do one more coil here, I can tell. So I need to come around and then go down through the middle to continue the coil, and then pull the wire all the way through, and then push it down again. Every time you make a coil now, continuously throughout the rest of the piece, make sure you push them close so it blends in nicely. And then I come around the side again, come upwards as if I was going to do another wrap, but now I want to incorporate the little petal that I just did. So that little meeting point between the two wires, well, obviously it's the same wire but the 2 points of the wire. So what I'm going to do is, instead of coming down through the middle, I'm going to go around the outside of that point. So really, as well, throughout you're going to be doing this, but you're going to judge it as you go, where you need to obviously make the shape with the base wire, but then also where you need to connect the points and where you need to make your wraps and that. So you then coil around that outside one just once. So you're coming up in the same place now in between the two wires, and then I want to go down through the midpoint again. So go down to the inside coils and pull that all the way through and push it down, and that's basically connected those two sides together now, as you can see there. And with this size earring, so using the 0.8mm as a base wire and the 0.4 as a weaving wire, for this I really only have to do this one time. So I've just connected here. Basically, you can imagine it's like a figure of 8 weave, connecting the two wires. So I have my two wires coming around the outside and then incorporating the one on the outside to then go back around the inside again. So that's all you've done. But if you're making the small one, so using the 0.6mm base wire and the 0.25mm weaving wire, what I recommend that you do is that you actually do this twice. So every time you have a connection point, if I was to do that again, I would go around that one more time and then move on. But for this, you can get away with the sides here, just doing it once. It's plenty strong enough. And then all you want to do is go back to just coiling around the inside wire. Again, we're still in the middle, so it can be a little bit fiddly here. Do another few coils to continue it before we then get to the point where we obviously have to start thinking about the next petal, which is always right from that last connection point that you've done. So where you obviously have the loose tail of the base wire, that's where you always have to consider your next petal, where that's going to end up. So for this, I had that connection point now. I can then start moving my long tail of my base wire around again to come around to the next one and decide where I want that to be. So something a bit like that. Again, get my chain nose pliers, get right where I want the connection point to be, and then bend it back outwards again. So there we go. And then obviously you can see how much space you have left with your coiling until you reach that connection point. So you just keep coiling until you do, and when you're there, which I think I just need to do one more, so down through the middle again. There, around the outside, and then I want to connect the two, so I'll go around the outside wire now and back up the same place and then back down through the middle, just to continue the coiling then. So there we go. So that's your next little petal that's ready there then. So we can then continue coiling around the inner part, and now you're also going to probably reach the point where we have basically the end of the wire, the very middle when we made the little loop, that's sticking in towards itself, and that's why you want it to leave a space between them, because you need space enough to fit your 0.4 mil, in this case weaving wire, to keep coiling past that point without it conflicting obviously. So again, just keep coiling here, and then I do a couple more coils, then I gotta remember to keep in mind where my next petal is going to be. And you just continue like this for a bit. So right in the middle here, I kind of do the first couple of petals like this, where I'm just bringing this tail of the base wire around softly like this, just a couple, maybe one more time or something. And then once I've done this, I then start to use my chain nose pliers to help shape the petals, because then obviously I want to start bringing a bit more shape into them and give them a bit more life. So I'm just going to do one or a couple more of these, and then I'll show you at that point what that's going to look like and how to achieve that. So then this next point that I'm going to show you here is where I make the petal using my chain nose pliers. So you can see I've kind of got the middle started now, and I just coiled a little bit further along as well. So what I like to do is I always like to make sure that my base wire is starting out with kind of going outwards a bit away from the project, not too much but at a nice angle there, and then I just use my chain nose pliers to place it where I want the first bit to be, and then I bend my wire against it, and again this is just judging it as you go. Sometimes you might want them to look one way, and then other times you might want to look a different way. And again, it obviously also depends how it's going to fit with what you've already done, because you want to make sure it's going to fit nicely. So I bent it there, and then I'm actually going to bend it all the way inwards again. And then I'm placing my plier after that bend to get ready for the next one. So back outward again, like that. And then I'm going from that after that bend that I just did, and then bending it a little bit inwards again, but more straight now, coming out to the side. And you can also adjust it as you go. Go after that bend you just did, and then I'm going to go all the way inwards again. And whether you go below or above your piece, it doesn't matter, because then I'm going to my last bend is going to be where that meeting point is going to be. So I'm keeping hold with my pliers where I want the bend to be, and then I'm taking my wire and just bending it kind of outwards again to get ready for the next petal. And then I have my shape for that petal in place, so you can see it looks like that. And then all you want to do here is, once you've got the shape of the petal in place, you then also now know where the meeting point is going to be. So in this case I have to just coil a bit further on with the weaving wire until it reaches that meeting point. So do that all the way over, again just going around the outside and then down through from the top to reach that meeting point. And obviously, like I said, each one that you make is going to be different, so every petal is going to be different even if you use kind of the same technique to make it. So something like this here. And now that meeting point I'm going to go around the outside wire instead to connect it. Back up in the same place and then back to the inside again. And then do your next coil so they connect together. And then I've done my coil there to connect them, and I've started out going back to coiling around the inside part here. And what I want to do is, you can also see I'm kind of running out of space because I'm now meeting back up with my very first connection point. So I'm also going to show you how I account for that. But I'm just going to do one last coil because you want to coil all the way that you can until that connection point that you're going to run into. And that's going to keep happening now. It's just to fill out then the wire, the base wire, so you don't really have a gap there with no coils around. So just like that. So I now have no more space around my base wire in this section before I run into that very first connection point that's on the current base wire that I'm coiling around. So to accommodate for that, all you gotta do is get over to the other side. It's coming out behind the piece, so I'm just going to bring it over to the other side of that connection point and then continue coiling on that other side of it. So basically your current wire is just going behind it. So that's pretty simple. Which is also why, in a way, once you've made it, you could say there is a front and a back to the piece, to the rose itself, because on one side you're going to have these wires crossing behind the connection points. It's not going to be too obvious, but you can see if you look closely. And now I'm just going to keep coiling here for a bit, and then I'm at a point again now where I have to make sure that I account for the next petal, because I have done a few coils. So I'm just going to make the next petal before I get too far, because otherwise I might have to undo some coils and I'd rather avoid that. So for this, again I take my chain nose pliers and then bend my wire against it to help shape it. So you just keep moving it the way you have to and just make it look however you want. There is no right and wrong really. It's just building it as you go. And also you can then also, in this case, with doing the petals here, then decide how open or how tight you want your rose to be, because that is then obviously determined on how you make your petals. So here, and then every time I've made a bend, I put my pliers right after the bend and then make my next one against it in the direction that I want it to go. And then here is my next petal. So as you can see, that's how I'm building up the petals using my chain nose pliers. And then you can see it's all, basically this is doing one big spiral by adding in all these petals along the way and connecting them with the weaving wire. So now all I got to do is continue coiling around the current area that I'm doing all the way until I reach that point where the next connection point is going to be between the loose outer one. And then again, when you reach the next connection point that you've done previously, all you got to do with your weaving wire is go behind it and continue. So you keep building your flower like this and your rose. And then what you also might want to do is, as you get larger and larger, you might want to start making the petals a little bit larger as well, to make it obviously a little bit more realistic, you could say, as realistic as it can be. So that's how you build this. So just keep doing this until you reach the size that you want it to be. So I've kept building up the rose here in exactly the same way that I showed you, just continued in that kind of spiral formation. And then I've reached the point where I actually want to finish it now, because I feel it has the size that I want it to have, and also that it kind of has the proportions that I also want it to have. So the midpoint there is kind of in the middle as much as it can be. So what I have now is the final connection point is right up here, and I've just kind of bent the tail of this base wire out of the way, so upwards, because we're going to use that later to then be able to attach it to the earring findings. So what I have now is my weaving wire coming right after that. I've continued attaching that just like I did throughout, But what we have left is the outer edge of the rose here that still hasn't got the weaving wire around it. So that's just the bare wire except for the connection points. So all you want to do to complete that, because obviously you want it to be quite an even look throughout, I'm just going to continue coiling around that outer edge. Just like this. So the exact same way pretty much. Except the only difference is I'm now not making any more petals. So we don't have to worry about the base wire there anymore. So you just continue like this all the way around until you get to that connection point. Except the same thing as before, go behind it and then just keep coiling all the way till you reach up to the very end there. And then you just want to get rid of your wire. And then all there's left to do really is then connect it to the earring findings. Obviously you want to make the other one as well. So just keep going around the outer edge so it's all going to be nice and even looking. So I then kept wrapping around the outside here as well, the edge, and it's a lot more cohesive looking now as well. And then I've ended up here doing my final wraps, right where I then have my base wire just coming straight out, because that's what we're going to use to then make a wrap loop to be able to attach to the earring finding. And I just have a little tiny short length left of my weaving wire, because that's all I ended up having left, so the length that I used fit just perfectly. But obviously if you have longer length you're just going to have to cut it off. And then what I want to do is just finish this off. So I just want to kind of do the final wrap. And then what I'm going to do is take my flush cutters here, and then I want to cut it off close to that final wrap, but so the end of the wire, once I've cut it off, is going to be coming in towards the inside of the outer edge there. So I'm not cutting it off on the outside, because what I want to do is then just completely squeeze it in, and then I like to just kind of push it down with my pliers, and then I roll it in the direction that the weaving wire is going around the base wire, because then that tucks it in and has the very end of that weaving wire gets tugged in on the inside of that piece, so it's far less likely to catch or scratch on anything. And then that's finished off there. So now what we have to do is finish off with the base wire. And for that I'm just going to get out my chain nose pliers again, or flat nose, whichever, and then I'm going to place them on that bare base wire that's sticking straight up, but I'm going to put it towards the side like this. This is just the way it's going to hang, the way that I want from the earring findings that I'm using. So you obviously want to do it according to what you're using. And I'm just leaving a little bit of space of bare base wire there in between the end of the rose and then the beginning of the pliers, because we need to leave that space to be able to do a few wraps with the wire. I'm bending that at an angle like that. And then you want to get either a pair of round nose pliers, or like these, I'm using the 6-step bell making pliers. I just like using these so I get the exact same size loop whenever I want them to be the same. Guaranteed. I place that right where I have the angle that I put in, and then I want to shape this, the long end of the tail, around it all the way so I achieve a full circle like that. And then I'm going to grab my chain nose again, and I like to hold that circle with the chain nose while I'm then doing a few wraps. Just going to straighten that out a little bit, because that makes sure that the circle there doesn't come out of shape. Hold on to that, and then I take the long tail and wrap it around below, and basically just filling in that space that we left. Just like that. Get my chain nose, cut off the excess, and then again when you cut it off, always just tuck it in with your chain nose or flat nose pliers, so you don't have a little piece of the end of the wire sticking out there. So there we go. That's then the wrapped loop, and that's all you need to do really. The rose itself is ready now. All we got to do is then use some jump rings to attach this to whatever earring findings that you want to use. So once you then of course made both of them and then attach them to the earring findings, you then have the finished earrings. And they look a little something like that. Obviously these are just the ones that I've made, and also here I made ones that are smaller, so you really can customize it to exactly how you like yours to be. So kind of small ones, and also if you want to use some finer wire, or the larger ones. It's completely personal preference, but they look like this, and they're quite simple and easy to make. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and thank you very much for watching. Hello there everyone. Today I want to show you how to make this rose wirework ear cuff, and this is what it can look like. So this is mine here. So you get your nice ear cuff that's going to grab onto your ear and also going to be nice and comfortable to wear, and then with the design and embellishment of the roses going all the way up and down the side of your ear there with a few leaves as well. So that's what it can look like. So if you want to learn how to make this, then keep watching. And all we're going to need to make this ear cuff